God, this thing smells so bad. Oh, this thing feels so much better. Thank you so much, Commando Store. Hey guys, Kick Creep here. Today, I want to show you guys a really cool combat uniform set. And well, I think it's really cool. What we're looking at here is the improved hot weather combat uniform. Now, I know that's not so special because it's general issue and just about everyone has them, but this is a really interesting set. This is actually the first generation that was originally issued back in 2017 to jungle warfare students. Now, by and large, this is pretty much the same as what is currently standard issue in the Army, but it has a few little bells and whistles on it that we're gonna look into. So last year, we talked about jungle pants and whether or not you actually need jungle pants. In that video, we looked at my very expensive Crye Precision G4 hot weather field pants. It's a mouthful. And then we compared them to a much cheaper and more available option like the proper BDU 2.0s. Now, originally, I wanted to compare the Crye G4 hot weathers to these pants right here. But I figured it might not be very fair if I compare very expensive and available pants to very unavailable and hard to get pants. I wanted to show you guys a really cool expensive option and then a very available and very usable budget option. So this video, we are just going to be talking about this really cool set here. And I also got the top to go with it, which is really cool. Now, the previous hot weather uniform that was issued was the BDU enhanced hot weather combat uniform. And those are really cool, but they don't really do anything very special. They're just 50-50 nylon cotton blend and ripstop material. This, however, the improved hot weather combat uniform actually does a really good job of keeping you comfortable in high heat and humidity. Now, if you haven't watched my jungle pant video, I get really deep into why jungle uniforms exist. Now, essentially, the same things that you wear stateside in a temperate environment can be stretched into a desert environment, which our military has been fighting in for quite some time now. The thing about a desert environment is that it gets really hot, but it's very dry. That means when you sweat, it evaporates into the dry atmosphere very quickly. So you lose a lot of moisture, but you can at least go through the cooling evaporative process. The issue with a jungle environment or a very humid environment is the fact that the air is saturated. So when your clothes get saturated, that moisture doesn't really have anywhere to go. That means that the threads can swell up and expand and make it almost water and airtight so you can't breathe. And that also means that you're not going through that cooling evaporation process because, again, the water has nowhere to go. So clothing that is designed for this hot and humid environment needs to be able to dry fast as well as ventilate really well. And we see a lot of that on the improved hot weather combat uniform. The material itself has been changed from both the ACU and the FRACU uniforms, and it also has the reduction of features in order to keep it more breathable, as well as the addition of some really nice convenient little things here and there. So here I have a standard improved hot weather combat uniform, not the early version, which you can distinguish by the fact that there is no Velcro real estate on the pocket flap. So I'm wearing the first gen, and here I have the standard issue version, and they have the exact same material makeup. So I'm just gonna read off of here. So what we have here is a 57% nylon and 43% cotton uniform. So it's not 50-50 nylon cotton. Now you would think a hot weather uniform would use more cotton than nylon, but that's not the case here. What's really nice about nylon is that it doesn't absorb water the same way that cotton does, allowing this to dry faster. And nylon is also more durable. So when we look at the 100% cotton BDU uniforms, those things are always fading and falling apart. They're not very durable. Whereas things that have at least 50% nylon in them are much more durable, just usually a little less breathable. But because nylon's more durable, you can actually make these out of a much thinner fabric, and that allows it to breathe more easily. And then, of course, having the cotton in there just keeps it feeling better next to skin as well as breathable. And then for the reinforcements at the knees, seats, and elbows, we have a 100% nylon construction at those reinforced areas. So like I said, the standard issue IHWCU uniform and the first gen have the same material makeup. So whether or not you have the first gen or the standard issue, you are going to have the same material. So starting with the differences between the first generation and the standard issue uniform, if you look at the pockets on the shoulders, we see that there is actually no Velcro real estate. So on most ACU, FRACU, and even raid mod tops, the pocket flap has a little piece of Velcro that's just big enough for something like a US flag. But on the first generation top, we do not see that present. And I think that that was done in order to reduce the amount of material stacking on top of each other. Because once you start stacking too many layers of material, it becomes less breathable. So you have the actual sleeve itself, as well as the pocket flap that has multiple layers for the button to fit through. And then of course the top layer to protect that button. So by adding an extra piece of material, that Velcro over top, well, you've just reduced the amount of breathability in that one area significantly. The other difference that I see is that we have a single button here at the pocket. So in order to open and close the pocket, you have one little button, and then you can stow things like a big old Write in the Rain notebook in there. Now on the standard issue IHWCU top, we see the double button design, much like what we see on the old BDUs. I do like the one button design, in my opinion. I think that it is really nice to be able to just have that singular button in the middle there, just to very quickly and easily secure whatever's in your pocket. But of course, if you have two buttons like on the standard issue one, you can choose whether or not you want to use both of them. The other thing about the improved hot weather combat uniform, on both the first gen and the second gen, we do not see a pen holder inside of the shoulder pockets. So on the inside, there is no little extra sleeve like what we see on like BDUs, and there is no little pass through up here. That is not present on either side. And the same thing goes for the second gen up at the shoulder pocket. However, on the second gen, the current issue version, there is a pen pocket sleeve that is added onto the left hand forearm of the jacket. So they've got two there, one for a pen, one for a Sharpie, or whatever you want to do. And that is basically where the differences end, because there is no pen holder on the sleeves of the first gen. So personally, I do like to just put the little pen next to my notebook in here and then secure it with that single button. The only issue with that single button design on the first gen is that the flap could very easily come up at the corner, and then I lose my little Write in the Rain pen. So that is something to say about the double button design of the current issue model. So that is pretty much it for the differences between the standard issue and the improved hot weather top. So let's just talk about these things in general. So everything that I'm going to talk about on the top from here on out is going to be the same for the standard issue model. On the ACU and FRACU uniforms, we do see Velcro at the cuffs, but much like the older BDUs and DCUs, we actually see buttons, but not the same way that we see them on BDU and DCUs. On the improved hot weather combat uniform, instead of multiple buttons and then a single hole on the adjustment flap, instead we see a single button and then multiple holes. And then the button is actually facing towards the inside of the wrist. That way, when you secure the button, it is facing inside and is safe from being snagged on things and ripped off. Buttons are very easily field repairable, but just protecting them a little bit by having them face inwards, as well as having this little extra material up top to protect them, keep them from snagging on things, is really awesome and convenient. I really like the design of the IHWCU cuff adjustment, but personally, your best bet in hot weather, just to stay as comfortable as possible, is to roll up your sleeves just a little bit and then let heat dump out of the sleeves. We do not see any pockets on the front. I know a lot of people really like to have those chest pockets for documents and E&E type stuff. Me personally, I really like that there is no extra material on the chest, just to let it breathe a lot better. There is no special ventilation thing on the back, but it doesn't really need it because it ventilates very, very well. And then we also see, I forget what they call this kind of collar, but we don't see a Mandarin collar. We just see a very simple standard collar here that if you flip it up, it's going to protect your neck from slings and other stuff, backpack straps, etc. And when you put it down, it's out of the way, very low profile, and it doesn't stack too much material. Now, to secure the jacket, we see buttons and buttonholes, which is going to be a lot lighter and more breathable than something like Velcro, as well as zippers. I like buttons a lot better because it allows more space for air to pass through in between those buttons, whereas a zipper creates a better seal, which isn't too great in a very hot and humid environment. The other thing with zippers is that they can get caked in mud, and the same thing goes for Velcro. So if you're in an actual jungle and you're crawling through mud and you're soaking wet and everything is caked in it, zippers can fail. Velcro can have a tendency to not adhere as easily, and buttons are just a very secure method. They are absolutely usable. No, they're not fast, but they are silent. They are very breathable and easily field repairable. Of course, on the sleeve, we have the nylon reinforcement here. That's great because that's an area that gets a lot of love when you're out in the bush. And it's good to make sure that that is nice and reinforced. And then lastly, up above the little shoulder pocket here, we do see a little IR tab in case you want your friends to see you or people who aren't your friends. But yeah, that's present on most uniforms. That's just a requirement. I don't really have any use for that. Next, we're going to talk about the bottoms. The bottoms are really what drew my interest towards the first generation combat uniform. We're going to talk about that and the differences between the current generation. So the coolest thing about the first generation is that we actually have a bug net built in to the pant. So typically people will wear gaiters or tuck their pants into their socks in order to keep ticks and any other little creatures from crawling up your leg and getting into your, but these, in an effort to keep them as breathable and protective as possible, actually have a mesh material that is built into the cuff. And you can see how high up this goes, which is really, really cool. So what you do is you would use these little cuff ties here, and you would just secure that around your ankle. I already got a bug crawling around on it. He's stuck inside of there. I don't know if you can see that little asshole. But yeah, so you would secure that. So instead of having to tuck the bottom of your cuff into your boot and blouse that, you can leave the bottom of the ankle open. So as you're walking around, that allows moisture and hot air to vent out the bottom. Because if you completely sealed off this cuff here, once that's saturated, it can become almost airtight. By having mesh down here to protect you from bugs and anything else getting up in there, and this open, it breathes a lot better, it feels a lot better, and you really notice the difference with that. Now, for me personally, I don't actually like to use that little cuff tie here. On the Crye G4 Hot Weathers, they actually have a elastic band to secure it and keep a nice seal around your ankle. That is much more comfortable because with a not stretchy piece of string like this, if you tie this really tight, well, it's not super comfy. It doesn't move with your body, and you can kind of feel like your tendons pushing against it. It's weird. So what I personally like to do is instead, I will tuck the mesh gaiter inside of my sock to secure it, and then I'll just drape the pant on over top. So by doing that, that ensures that no bugs are going to be able to get up into my pant, and then it keeps it nice and breathable, and I don't have to worry about tying and untying something every time I want to take off my pants to change or do whatever. What's actually really cool is the cargo pockets on here. So the cargo pockets actually only have a single button. Now on BDUs and DCUs, we see two buttons, one back here and then one towards the front. But what I typically do on my BDUs is I only do the rear button. I leave the front button undone. That way I can very easily take things in and out of my pocket, but it's still pretty secure even without doing that front button. And it looks like someone else noticed that, and on these improved Hot Weather combat uniform, they just completely omitted that front button, and it's super easy to take things in and out. I do want to talk about how on the back of the pants, we do not see any back pockets. Now, this is also what we noticed on the G4 Hot Weathers from Crye. Having no back pockets just allows a lot more breathability. Personally, I don't like back pockets because that is just anything that goes in there is going to get sat on and destroyed, as well as drenched in sweat. So I personally don't need back pockets. I don't use them. I like that they're omitted, and that just means that there's less material stacking up back there to keep them a lot more breathable. But what we do see is that nylon reinforcement like we see on the elbows of the top as well as the knees. So that is really the coolest part about these pants. Everything else is pretty much the same between the first gen and the current issue. So let's just look at the rest of the pants and just show you what we got going on. Of course, we have belt loops up at the top. These are pretty wide, and you can fit a pretty wide belt in there, which is really nice if you're running a gun belt or something similar. You can very easily fit a base belt under there. We of course have some normal hand pockets. I'm actually really surprised that I don't see any mesh being used inside of here, and there's also no drain holes at all. You would think that on jungle pants you would see like more drain holes, but there's actually none. I thought that was really interesting. The fly is a full button up. There is no zipper. Moving back down to the knees, we do see that nylon reinforcement again down here. That way when you take a knee or if you're sliding around or doing anything, it's just going to protect the pant a little bit more as well as your skin. The other cool thing about these pants is that they are articulated. We usually hear that phrase in reference to gloves that have a pre-curve in them and are articulated for your fingers instead of just being a straight piece of material. A pre-curve glove is going to have a natural curve in the fingers. So instead of fighting against the glove, it's going to just feel much more natural. What's cool about having the pre-curve or articulated knee in your pants is that as you're walking, because it's not straight, it's going to have a little bit more standoff from your knee, and that's going to actually reduce chafing. If you've ever got bad chafing on your kneecap from your pants, you know how badly that sucks, and no one likes that. And so it just makes it more breathable because the fabric is not in direct contact with your skin as much, so you have a little bit more airflow and reduced chafing. So I think that that is super cool, and that's what makes these much more comfortable than something like ACU, FRACUs, BDUs, and DCUs. And then lastly, for the pants, we do see some little ankle pockets down here. These use a single button. I typically like to put things like trash in there. The reason that I only put garbage in the ankle pockets or things that I don't care about is because if you are wading through water or even mud, anything that is below your knee is absolutely going to get soaking wet or just covered in mud, and anything in here is not going to have a great time. Now, some of you might already be on eBay trying to find yourself a set of the first gen because you might think that they're cool like I do, and then horribly disappointed at how unavailable they are. Well, I'm here to tell you that you don't need the first gen. The improved hot weather combat uniform that is currently being issued and is in general issue is super, super good, even without the really cool bug net stuff, all right? But fortunately, Venture Surplus did sponsor this video and they gave us a discount code. So I would recommend that you go on over there and you pick up a set of standard improved hot weather combat uniform. And I'm going to show you a few cool tricks to help you keep the bugs out of your pants like you can do on these first gens. I would recommend something like the Outdoor Research Rocky Mountain High Gator. This one actually has insect shield on it. It's bug repellent that is already coated on here, which is cool. These are really lightweight and breathable. They don't really have any waterproof coatings because that's not really what these are for. These are not like mountaineering expedition gaiters. So they're not really for keeping moisture out. They're more for keeping the bottom of your pant protected, as well as keeping bugs from getting up into your pant, and as well as keeping things from getting down into your shoe like that, because that always sucks on the trail. So what you can do is, on a standard pair of pants, you just throw these over the back, and then it's got a little hook in the front to keep it attached to your laces. We also have a little piece of nylon up here to secure the top and make sure it doesn't fall down. So what's nice about these is that they're very high. They protect a lot more of your pant as well as your upper boot. So it serves a lot of different purposes. They're also very quick and easy to put on, as well as very lightweight. The only issue is that, like I've been saying throughout the video, is that all of this extra material can really reduce the amount of breathability and cause the bottom of your leg to just not dry out very quickly. And that very quickly leads to extremely wet and saturated socks. So that's why I would also recommend something like the Outdoor Research Feroci Gators. No, I am not sponsored by Outdoor Research. I just really do like their stuff. The only issue with the Feroci Gator is that you do have to take off your boot in order to put it on. So you'd have to take off your shoe, slide it over your foot, wipe all that crap off your sock. This is a very stretchy and very breathable material. The only issue is that it's not very durable. It's a hell of a lot less durable than the Outdoor Research Rocky Mountain High. It doesn't protect as much of the pant, but in my opinion, I think that this is much better suited to very hot weather because it also dries out a lot faster than this does. This has a tendency to lock moisture in if you're totally saturated. The other thing about these is that they are not as quick and easy to don and doff as the Rocky Mountain High gaiters, which can just go over your boot, over your pant, easily seal up. These really can't fit them over your boot, even with all the stretch that they got. So that just about does it for the improved hot weather combat uniform. I think that it's actually one of the best pieces of general issue surplus to hit the market in a while. I've been using BDUs for pretty much as long as I've been collecting surplus because they are so great, they're iconic, they feel good, they look good. The ACUs and FRACUs never really interested me. Now, like I said, it is a little tough to find the first generation. The best way to distinguish the first gen top is, of course, the pocket flaps. But when it comes to the pants, it's not as easy because when people take photos of the listing, they don't typically show that mesh material down here. So the best way to discern whether or not something is a first gen pair of IHWCU pants is by looking at the label. The label will actually say mesh in the materials, right? So of course you're going to see the basic material, which is the 57% nylon and 43% cotton, and then the reinforcement material, which is 100% nylon, but then you'll see an extra material that says mesh, and that mesh material is referring to the bug net at the ankles. So that is a surefire way to know that it's a first gen pair, but without photos, you can't tell whether or not a user cut the bug net because some people just didn't like it that much, so they ended up cutting them off. We do see guys in the military wearing their IHWCU sets year round, not just in hot weather. Even guys up in Vermont are still wearing their IHWCU set well into the shoulder seasons and even the winter seasons. And the reason being that they dry so quickly. When we talk about our cold weather uniforms like the PCUs, we talk about fast drying. And fast drying is very important because, of course, saturated wet clothing is a great way to get hypothermia. So by having a combat set that is going to dry quickly year round, it's going to greatly increase your effectiveness because that's going to reduce all that water weight that it can absorb, as well as keeping you dry and warm. Now, like I said, Venture Surplus did sponsor this video, so definitely go over and use that discount code to get 10% off your entire order. They do have improved hot weather combat sets, as well as the BDU 2.0 pants that I talked about last year. I'm pretty sure that the BDU 2.0s are using the same material as the improved hot weather combat uniform because it is still that 57% nylon, 43% cotton, and the 2.0s are made by Proper. Proper also has a contract for the improved hot weather combat uniform, so it would make sense that they would be using the same materials because it is so light, breathable, and comfortable. So that pretty much does it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Big thank you to Venture Surplus for sponsoring this video. Hopefully you guys thought that this was cool. I think that it's super cool. I wish you guys luck if you try finding a set for yourself. But like I said, the standard issue IHWCU uniform is super awesome. And thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.